So excited to have Kim Flottum here. Kim is a favorite on our webinar series. Has been with us, I think, Kim, this is the 6th year here. Kim is editor of Bee Culture magazine and a prolific beekeeping author. And we're really excited to have him here talking about drones. When I first asked him to do a topic, he said, I'll do all about drones. And then he emailed me back and he said, okay, let's do a lot about drones, since we only have about 55 minutes together. So Kim, I'll turn the floor over to you. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Okay, drones, things you knew, some you weren't quite sure of, and a few things you didn't know probably, but not everything because it would take too long. There's a lot about drones that tends to get overlooked when you're starting out and even after you've been keeping bees for a while. And I just want to touch on some of those things because they do play an integral role in the biology and the success of a colony over the course of a season. And the more you know about them, the better able you'll be able to take a look at your colony and make some predictions about what's going on, make some assumptions about what has just happened perhaps, and make some plans about what you might be looking for or be able to do. So that'll help you be a better beekeeper, help your colony be more successful. All of this because of drones. So let's just take a look here. There's so many things going on in a colony when you first open it up, and if you're new at this, everything is kind of exciting. And if you've been at this almost as long as I can, it takes you, when you pull out a frame, you look for I'm looking for the queen, and I'm looking for brood, and I'm looking for this and that, and drones tend to be not the first thing I look for, or at least they didn't be, and now drones are one of the first things I am looking for, because if I pull out a frame and there's lots and lots of drones, suddenly I'm aware of a change that I may have to fix or make an adjustment for. If there are no drones at all, and I'm assuming that there should be, then again I'm notice from the colony that something's going on that I need to pay attention to. They are an excellent indicator of colony health, and it's not because you look at individual drones and they're ill or not. It's that, are there any? Or are there too many? Or are there just the right number? And we'll look at this a little bit more later, but as you go through the rest of the summer, and I can say that now because it's summer, as you go through the rest of the summer, every time you take a frame out from the middle of the brood box, from the edge of the brood box, from the honey supers, watch the landing board, take a look at how many drones are in each of those places. Get a feel for the population in the different compartments in a colony, because the population in those departments is going to tell you what's going on in all of the colony, but you may see lots on the landing board, none in the brood nest, those sorts of things, and they'll change over the course of the season. So nutritional status indicators, they're certainly good at that. If the colony starts going through food stress, the first kids that don't get fed are the drones, and they're the most expendable, and they're the first ones to go, and then the adults, and then they start worrying about workers, about how much food workers are going to get. So the status of the nutritional status of a colony is drones make a good sign for that. Gene transfer mechanism, of course, and we're going to look at how that works real closely here. But if you've got a really good colony and the queen is doing everything you want and the colony is doing everything you want in the location that you put it, then you know that you've got something special and you want to repeat it, you want to duplicate it, replicate it. Getting the genes from the queen that you have to the next colony that you want to produce is going to be through the drones, not through the queen. So what you're going to want is to be able to use those drones to get genes from one generation to the next. As a heat sink, because they're so big, and because they're, I'm not going to say immobile, but they don't move nearly like workers do, they tend to help regulate colony temperature, and I'm not talking about making the temperature much warmer or much cooler, but they sort of soften the blow of temperature change because they're as big as they are, and in the summer as numerous as they are, and into the fall. and they're cute. You just can't not say that drones aren't cute. And if you haven't done this before, you got to do it now. We're going to take a look at this first. You can leash a drone and take it to school, and you will never have more fun in the classroom than the first time you do this. And here's how you do it. Catch several drones and put them in a small container and put them in your refrigerator to cool them off so they're not terribly mobile. And then you take a drone when it's not flying and moving, squirming, and you put a tiny, tiny drop of super glue on the top of his thorax. And then I use like 20 feet of sewing thread. That's all you need. And you put the sewing thread on the drop of glue, and you blow it a couple of times, and when you're blowing, you're going to be warming the drone at the same time as the glue is drying. And do this for 5 or 6 or 7 drones, and put them in a small bottle that has a cap you can fasten with the thread hanging out of the attached cap. Before you do this, put a little bit of facial tissue in the bottom of your container that has been dampened pretty good with sugar syrup so that they have something to eat when you are transporting them. And don't make it so small that they're very crowded. But you can get 5 or 6 into, I use 3 in a prescription medicine bottle, and that works pretty well. So you put them in there, and you keep them as cool as you can. You don't want to put them in your pocket because it's going to get really warm. Keep them cool, and then take them to wherever it is you're going to go. And then begin your talk, and then you take the lid off your bottle, and you take out the first thread, and you put the lid back on, and you let the drone fly out, and you can actually walk that drone around the classroom, and it'll buzz, and it'll make a lot of noise, and it's fun to do, and then you can slowly pull the drone in and have him land on your hand, and you can walk around and show everybody, let them touch the drone, because they don't sting and all of those things. And then you can get out another one, and then you can take out your third one and give it to that little guy over in the corner who's just excited as heck about this and is going to remember this moment the rest of his life when you let him hold that thread and move that drone around the room. Or the teacher, either one, they all work. But this is a fun thing to do in a classroom, and you will not be forgotten if you do this in a classroom. People go in and do bees and equipment and veils and all of these things in frames, but you bring a drone into a classroom and you will be remembered forever. So it's fun to do, and I enjoy doing it, and I've done it a few times. But let's get down to the serious stuff here, the biology. Well, let's take a look at the biology of all of the bees in a colony and how they fit together. Because if you don't know the biology of all of the bees in your colony, you're not a beekeeper, you're a bee haver. And that may be where you want to be in this craft. But if you want to be aware of what's going on and be able to manage a colony successfully, you've got to have some handle on biology. So let's take a look at what's going on inside here. Starting with a drone. Up in the upper right-hand corner, have you ever seen one of those? That's a fly, actually. But you look at the big eyes and you look at the coloring and you say, drone. Well, it's not. It's a fly. And of course, the giveaway is it only has 2 wings instead of 4. But often these kinds of flies are mistaken for drones. But drones, 3 days an egg, 6.5 days on average a larva, 14.5 days on average a pupa, 24 days development time total. They're the longest. We'll look at the rest in a moment. They come from unfertilized eggs. So when the queen releases an egg from her oviduct and it comes down through the system, she does not release sperm to fertilize it. So the drone does not have a father, but has a grandfather, because of course the queen had a father. Genetically identical to his mother, the queen, and that's important when you're thinking about, if you're thinking about raising more queens from that colony, and you want to transfer the good traits and not the bad traits or the ones that you're not looking for. After a drone emerges from its pupa in 5 to 10 days, depending on weather and temperature in the colony and nutrition and all of these things, it's ready to fly. and it will make several practice flights, and then it will go out looking for a drone congregation area, find a virgin queen, and if he's fast enough, he'll catch her and he'll be able to mate. Drone congregation areas, how do they find them every year? Because the drone emerged this spring. There's nobody from last year to tell him where to go. Where's that drone congregation area? Yet they go out and they find them consistently every year. So it hinges on topographical features, the edges of forests, open fields. There was a drone congregation area once that I was able to find that was on right over the top of a Hardee's restaurant. Don't ask me why. But you could very often in the summertime drive into that parking lot and find dead drones on the ground. So how they picked it, why they picked it, still to me is a mystery, but they managed to find them. As I said, drones are a luxury in a colony. They're only raised when times are good, and that's a key for you. If you have no drones and you're looking around and all the colonies are doing well except the one you're looking at, something's going on in that colony that you need to be aware of, and you need to look farther. And the first clue you have is no drones, none on the landing board, none on the first couple of frames. What's going on? And then you're going to start looking further. One of the most notable features, of course, is the large eyes they have on the top of their head. And if you think of drone flying in a drone congregation area, they are at 10 to 30 feet high off the ground. Queens come in 40 to 50 feet off the ground. And so the drones that are below them will see the queens above them, and that's why the eyes are on the top of the head. They're larger than workers, smaller than queens, and of course they have that. They're raised in the special cells. We're going to look at that in a minute. Unfortunately for them, they are favored by Varroa mites. Given a choice, Varroa mites will almost always go for a drone rather than a worker, but they'll go for workers too. So, but we're not going to go into Varroa a whole lot. Lives 6 to 12 weeks, depending on the time of year that they're born, the nutritional status, the health of the colony, the weather, all of those things. But they're not around very long. Short, happy life, let's hope. By comparison, let's look at workers. They come from fertilized eggs. So as the egg is coming down, their queen releases a bit of sperm that fertilizes the egg. So there's parts of mom and parts of maybe several, but at least one other father contributing to the genetic makeup of that worker. 3 days an egg, 6 days a larva, on average 12 days of pupa, 21 days development time total. So they have genes from one drone father and the queen mother. So you've got half of the queen and some father. And that some father aspect is one of the great aspects of why colonies are successful, is because there are so many fathers contributing to the population of the colony. And when that queen flies out to meet, she's mating with 10, 12, let's hope 20 or 25 different drones before she settles down and starts laying eggs. And so you've got 25 different families in that colony. Some of them are good cleaners, and some of them are good foragers, some of them are good guards. So you end up with a very diverse population in a colony, and this is what makes colonies successful. Workers are fed different quality food than queens or drones. They're not able to mate, but they can lay unfertilized eggs, and given the right chemical cues in the colony, which is usually the colony's gone queenless and there's no cue, the reproductive elements of a worker will develop to the point where they can produce and lay eggs. Now they haven't mated, so there's no sperm, so they are all unfertilized eggs, so they're all going to turn into drones. Workers in the colony all have the same mother but different fathers, and again that's contributes to the grand, let me put it this way, the grand diversity in a honeybee colony. So interestingly, a worker can determine at the larva stage a sister as opposed to a half-sister, and the kin recognition that goes on there, she will favor taking care of her full sister more than her half-sister. It balances out because that half-sister also has full sisters in the colony, and it balances out and everybody gets taken care of. But when it comes to raising queens, if this queen is a sister, as opposed to a half-sister in a colony. There is some recognition going on there, and there's also some favoritism, if you will. And sisters are more alike than half-sisters, and that, again, contributes to the diversity that's going on in the colony. Queens, very briefly, 1 to 3 years. Boy, I wish I could have a queen that lived 3 years anymore. That used to be the norm, and anymore that's kind of gone away. They come from fertilized eggs, 3 days an egg, on average 5.5 days of larva, on average 7.5 days of pupa, for about 16 days development total, the least of all 3 of the individuals in a colony. And I've heard people speculate, and there's probably been a lot of research that contributes to this, but when the colony needs a queen, you need her right now. You don't need her in 24 days or 21 days, you need her right now. So that she develops in 16 days makes some sense. Queens are chosen from the same eggs in the colony as the workers were. Of course, there's different fathers involved, but the difference between a queen and her worker sisters and half-sisters is, I dumped this on nutrition because that's kind of what it comes down to, but the difference in nutrition turns on some different genes in the bee that's chosen to be a queen, and the epigenetics of the situation are that she develops different organs and differently than her half-sisters or sisters, and the nutrition is turning on genes. So I like to say nutrition, and I'm comfortable with that, but it's a whole lot of genetic things that are going on. As I said, she may mate with as many as 20 drones when she's old enough. When she emerges and old enough to fly, she will go out 2, 3, 4, 5 times, perhaps, depending on how often, how many drones she's able to meet, the weather, all of those things. You'd like to hope that she's able to mate up with 20 or so drones. More would be better. Fewer gets to be a problem, and the problem is that your diversity in your colony begins to decrease. She's easily observable, long tapering abdomen. She's larger than workers and drones, and she's an egg-laying machine. We're going to look at that in a minute. What is an egg-laying machine here? But there you have kind of the biology quickly of drones and workers and queens, just so you have a feel for their differences going on in a colony. As I said, there are differences in adults, and this is a good picture that shows the eyes on the top of the head and the reasons for that. When you're looking at drones as pupa, you can take a look here. You can see when you look at a drone brood, sealed brood, it's like they say it's bullet shaped. It bulges out from the flat surface of the brood comb, whereas workers are smaller and their cappings are flat. If you remove the cappings, you can see the difference between drone eyes and worker eyes, and it's very obvious when you see that. I said the queens are egg-laying machines, and one of the things that everybody is told when you start out keeping bees is that how many eggs a day should a queen be laying, and all of the books say 2,000. And my question always is, how do you know? Is your queen really laying 2,000 eggs a day, or is it 500, or is it 7,000, or how do you know? And here's how you can calculate that. When you're looking at workers, this is for sealed brood. Now count the cells, square inches, frames of capped brood. Now you can a way to do this is to use the camera on your cell phone, and just take a picture of every frame that has sealed brood on it. Take it home. Dump it onto your computer, get a beer, sit back and count cells of sealed brood on every frame. You can do it. The third time you do this, you'll get really fast. You can start looking at square inches of brood and begin to make estimates. You can do a percent of a frame and begin to do estimates. And after you've done this for a season, you get really good really fast, and it's really easy to do. The first couple of times are pretty tedious, but it's really worth the time. So you figure out how many cells of capped brood you have today at noon. You take all of those pictures. 12 days from today, at noon, you go back and you do it again. You take pictures of every frame with cells of capped brood. You take the first number and you subtract it from the second number, and that's going to give you the worker eggs laid during those 12 days. Divide by 12 and it's going to give you eggs per day. And it's that simple, he says carefully, because I know it's not. But it is worth your time to do it. And when you've done it a couple of times and you're looking and you say, okay, last time I did this I had 7 frames with sealed brood on them, about a third full, or whatever your number is. You begin to get an estimate really close as your queen, and what you're looking for is an increase in rate or a decrease in rate. Not exactly so much the number, although the number is important. You're looking for an increase in rate and a decrease in rate, and you want to be able to evaluate your queen on those grounds. Is she doing what she's doing? Is she slowing down? Is she speeding up? Should she be slowing down? It's August. Should she be laying as many eggs as she was in April? Those sorts of calculations are going to give you a good handle on what your population's doing. So when you look at that, you can say, you say, okay, I've got 2,000 eggs a day, let's say. In 12 days, that's 24,000 eggs I'm going to have. That's 24,000 bees are going to emerge in the next 12 days. Where are they going to go? And that's going to tell you that in 12 days to 2 weeks, you better have some additional room in that colony, because you're going to have a whole lot more bees that are going to take. If you look at a frame, when a bee is standing on a frame, she covers 2 cells. So instead of having 24,000 eggs, or 24,000 bees, you're going to need space on that frame that's going to cover 48,000 cells. So you can do the same for drones, and it's 14 and a half days, and you do it exactly the same way, and that's going to tell you how many drones your queen is producing, and is it in line with the way it should be? Is it slowing down, speeding up? But this is a good tool to have in your toolbox, and being able to take a look at how well your queen is producing and what you can look for down the road in terms of bees in your colonies. Drones, when you take a look at drones, because they come from their mother, often you'll get a colony that's supposed to be Italian, and you look at it and you say, this looks more Carniolan, or this doesn't look as Italian as I thought it should be. But the trick is how does it behave? And a way to measure that is, does the drone replicate its mother? And when I'm looking for an Italian queen, even if it's got some Carniolan markings or it's darker than I would like it to be, I'm looking at the drones. An Italian drone should look like an Italian queen, and it should be just, you can see it here, just as gold as his mother. And that's going to tell you that the eggs that she's producing are producing Italian drones and the attributes of Italian workers. I'm always comfortable if I see drones that look right relative to what they're supposed to be. And the same thing goes with Carniolans. You can see that Carniolan drone in the middle there. It's as dark as his mother. And that's what I'm looking for. You can see the worker from that queen looks, could that be an Italian? Yeah, it could be. But that drone is as dark as his mother, and when I see that, then I'm comfortable with the fact that my colony is supposed to have a Carniolan queen, and its attributes are going to be far more Carniolan than that. And that's another good key to use when you're looking at that. When you get to the Russians and survivors, they're all over the map. And because there's so many lines going on, survivors are, of course, like the lines that are being produced here in Ohio and elsewhere, they're not chosen for what they look like, they're chosen for what they do, and what they look like comes in third in terms of importance. The people that are producing these want bees that are dealing well with their local environment, that are handling Varroa, that are taking care of the problems that bees are subject to anymore. So when I look at a Russian queen, that's a Russian queen in the middle there, and you take a look at the drones there, and what are they? Well, who knows? And that's exactly what you're going to end up with when you get some of these mixed heritage lines of bees. And actually, to me, that's a good sign. Is that they all looked Italian, that'd be one thing. If they all look Carniolan, that would be something else. And that I've got a mixed bag here. I'm comfortable with that Russian queen. So if you're getting these queens from breeders in wherever it is you're getting them from, expect this sort of diversity in the colony in terms of both behaviors by the workers and in appearance by both workers and drones. Drones, of course, in the brood nest, drones are produced on the edges of the brood nest, and you can see these frames here. And it's because they require an environment that's a degree or so less cooler than the center of the worker brood nest. And so you're going to find drones produced on the edges of frames. Down at the bottom, you can see them in the upper right. Down at the bottom, you can see on the bottom picture, you're going to see them on, if you're doing top bar hives, you're going to see them on the edges of the top bar hive and down at the bottom. And that's because of the temperature regimen that they need to produce or to develop in. Well, you can use this and for a couple of ways. One is certainly if you're looking for drones, you're not going to look in the middle of the brood nest. You're going to look on the edge of the brood nest. You're going to look on the bottom of the bottom frames of the brood nest, and you're going to look on the outside edges of the frames of the brood nest. And you're going to look at the outside frames, the outside of the outside frames. That's where you're going to see probably most of the drones in your colony. Now, if you see a whole lot of drones right in the middle of your brood nest, then you know you've got an issue with laying workers or a drone laying queen or something else is going on. And again, knowing about drones, that's going to tell you something that you need to look more into. But in terms of normal production and a healthy colony that's doing things right, you're going to see drones produced on the edges of the brood nest, and you can use that when it comes to Varroa control. And if I know that that Varroa is going to more or less favor drones over workers given a choice. That's not an absolute, but it's a good working model. If I know that Varroa are going to choose drones over workers, and I know where the drones are, I know where to start looking for Varroa and where Varroa is going to congregate in my colony. If I am using drone brood to trap Varroa, then I'm going to be able to know where to put my drone brood trap frames. And I run strictly 8-frame medium colonies. That's everything I own is 8-frame medium. And given that, my Varroa control is strictly, completely, totally, always trapping Varroa with drone brood. And my technique works like this, and it works for me pretty well. I've been satisfied with it for a number of years, and if you can try it and make it work for you, I hope it does. But what I do starting in April is I'm up in Northeast Ohio, so you can know my weather up near Cleveland. And with 8-frame colonies, I run brood nests in 3 boxes over winter. And in the middle box on frame 2 from the outside, I will put in a foundationless frame on, let's just say, Sunday. In another week, I will put in a foundationless frame in position 7 in the same box. So now I've got 2 foundationless frames in that same box. In another week, on the next Sunday, I will put in a foundationless frame in position 2 on the 3rd box up. So now I've got 3 frames. And then I sit back and wait a week. And then after the 3rd week, after 21 or 22 days, I will go into the box and I will remove the first frame that I put in, and it's going to look a lot like what you're looking at right here, down in the bottom right-hand corner. Some of it will be capped, some of it won't. And for me, that's okay. Now, remember that it takes 24 days for a drone to emerge. So I'm going to catch, after 21 days, a lot of them that are already capped, but not all of them. And the advantage of 21 days versus waiting to that 24th day is that I may screw up and forget, or I may be out of town, which happens a lot, or I may just plain forget, which also happens a lot, and go back on there on day 22 or 23 and still not have missed my opportune time to remove that frame. So I'm going to remove that frame, and I have chickens, so I'm going to take that frame, I'm going to cut out the wax, and the chickens see me coming from the bee yard, and they're all plastered against the gate because they know what's coming. I'm waving this frame at them, and they know that lunch is about to be served, so they're real happy with this. It's hard on the drones, of course. It's equally hard on the Varroa, of course, and it's a lot of wax that the bees have to redo, and that's the price I'm paying for not putting chemicals in my beehive. So after 21 days, I remove one frame. The next week, I remove the next one. The next week, I remove the next one, and the process continues until about the 4th of July or so. This year, it's going to be a little bit longer. I was out last night, and by about the 4th of July, I have a hard time finding any Varroa in my colony. I continue to monitor because I'm worried about things like Varroa bombs or whatever. I remain vigilant, but by about the 4th or 5th, the first or second week of July, I've trapped most of the Varroa out of my colony. The upside is I haven't put anything in my colony to control Varroa. The downside is that it's a religion. You cannot miss that day, because once you do, all of those capped cells that you're seeing on that frame are going to emerge, and they're going to release the Varroa with them. We're going to look at the reproductive rate here in a minute. And it's a religion. And if you miss one, then you got a problem. So there's a lot of labor, but I don't have a lot of colonies, and it's hard on the bees because they're producing a lot of wax, but I don't have to put anything in my colonies to control Varroa. So for me, using this edgy technique works, and I'm pleased with it. I'm a backyard beekeeper. I've got the time and the resources to do this. I know that if I was running 1,000 colonies, this isn't even considerable, but it is, if you're in that same position, it is something you may want to consider trying. And I talked about the reproductive rate of Varroa in a colony, and if a female Varroa goes into a brood cell, a worker brood cell, what's going to emerge on average is 1.2 mites. If she goes into a worker cell, because of the longer development time, she has more time to raise more kids, out are going to come 2.8 mites. So you can see that if you forget to take that brood comb, that drone brood comb out, you are going to double your mite population with, in 21 days or 24 days. So it pays not to miss that cycle, but by respecting that cycle, you're removing a lot of mites from the colony. And you get to the point towards after about the third cycle that it's hard to find a mite, and you have to go looking for them because you've just removed the gravid females and her daughters when you take that brood out of there. And it just reduces the population immensely. But you can see why when you look at the reproductive rate here. If you are raising queens, or you plan to raise queens, you're going to have a drone source colony, and that drone source colonies. Let me make that clear. Colonies, and you're going to want those drones to come from the queens that you want, and therefore you're going to be doing isolating the drones into those colonies from the queens that you want, so that you get, and basically what you're going to be doing is having your breeder queens raise drone source colony queens so that they're producing drone source colony drones. And it's not difficult, but it needs to be done, and you need to look at it. And you have to remember that if the drones that the queen produces are identically genetic, so when those drones mate with queens from other colonies, they're passing on all of the attributes that queen that you are that he came from had. So if her colony was hygienic, if her colony produced a lot of bees, or her colony had whatever attributes you were looking for, then he's going to pass those on to the next generation when he mates. So to get the queens that you want, you need to control both the drone sources and the queen sources when they mate, and this is why commercial queen producers, this is why queens cost $36, is because you have to control all of these things all at once and make sure that they work. And there's some things you're going to run into here doing this that you want to think about. I'm gonna get back to this queen thing in a second here. I want to just go through life as a drone, just in general. Sort of, you can see in the upper left here that they start out in drone comb, and when they emerge, they are, I'm going to say, helpless and pretty close. They can't feed themselves. They don't move very well. They don't fly for quite a few days. They're pretty helpless, and they are fed by the workers in the colony, and they are just pretty much a burden on the colony, which is why one of the reasons is when times get tough, these are the guys that get kicked out first, is because they're the most work, and if times are that tough, they're not going to be doing much flying, so why bother feeding them, why bother taking care of them? So it's life as a drone is precarious, because if times are good, you're going to live well, and if times are bad, not so well. So after a few days, and depending on the time of the season and the weather and temperature in the population of the colony, you'll have drones that are able to fly, and once they start flying, they'll take a couple of days and make play flights just like workers, and then once that happens, then they go out and by magic they find those drone congregation areas, and they're gone, and they're looking for queens to mate with. So that's some of the attributes of what goes on between the time they emerge and the time that they are able to fly out and mate. There are some things that are bad for drones, and this is another reason that commercial queen producers are challenged with all of these things. And basically any chemical that you put in a colony is going to affect both the queen and the drones in terms of reproductive ability, in terms of hardiness, in terms of almost anything that you want to consider to be important in a colony. Some of the chemicals that we are using to control Varroa shorten the life of queens, shorten the life of drones, render them either unable to fly or able to fly shorter distances for shorter periods of time. All sorts of things go bad when you start introducing chemicals to a colony, and you're looking at what it's going to be doing to this particular aspect of your colony, the reproductive aspect of your colony. Not so much workers. They're still not quite as affected, but once you start putting, so if I'm a commercial queen producer and I've got to have drones, I got to have them alive, and I got to have them healthy. So to keep them healthy, I've got to keep chemicals in my colony to keep the Varroa down, which really decimate drones and drone populations. So I'm introducing. Well, I think you can see the issues that commercial queen producers are challenged with, and it's a balancing act to keep healthy drones Varroa free and chemical contact minimized, along with the queens that they're mating with. Again, when you're paying $36 for a queen, maybe now hopefully you'll have a little more understanding of what goes into producing one of those queens. Here's a bunch of things you can use drones for, and these are just good management things. Take a queen. In the middle there you can see there's a queen marking pen marking a queen, but go in and mark 20 drones. And then come back out in a week and find out where they went. And if you've got 5 colonies, you'll find drones from that one that you marked in all 5. And that could be guaranteed. Now, here's something to think about, is if you've got a colony that has a lot of Varroa in it, and you've got drones going hither and yon, back and forth, they're going to take some of those Varroa with them in all probability. So suddenly the Varroa population in your bee yard, whether it's 2 colonies or 20, begins to even out, and everybody's got some. So that's one thing to take a look at, and that's going to help you show you how colonies drift. Again, monitoring health. If you today, the first day of summer, where I'm at, it's going to be 75, 76 degrees. I should at noon be able to walk up to the colony and see drones on the landing board, kind of getting ready to take their afternoon mating flight. And if I don't, something's going on, or I'm late or something. But if there's 50 of them out there, something else is going on. So monitoring colony health by just observing how many drones you have and what they're doing in the time of day. And they, like I said, they're good. You can mark them, and they're good for practicing marking your queens. You'll never get stung, and they don't care. And once you've got them marked, then you can start using them to check drifting. And again, we talked about taking drones to class. And even if you don't put them on a leash, you can take them out and you can hold them by their legs and listen to them buzz, and you'll get kids squealing all over the room, and they're fun to have with you. But these are some things that you should think about using drones for, is to especially the drift thing. Try monitoring, try marking all the drones, and then go down to the other end of the row of your colony, mark all of them yellow on one end and all of them blue on the other end, and see where they all end up. And then if you've got a friend who lives a mile or so down the road that's got bees, go look for your drones in his colonies. And see if you got a good relationship, mark some of their drones and see if you find their drones in your colonies. You're going to find out that bees are a lot more social than you were even led. They're a social insect, but you're going to find out that they're a lot more social than you might have thought. So it's fun to do. It gives you a bigger picture of what's going on, and it'll help you kind of understand why things are the way they are. As I said, queens mate with up to 20 drones. You'd like to see 20 or 25 drones minimum that they mate with, so that you have input from the genetics of 20 different fathers in that colony. Just think of it, it becomes less of a family than a community when you have that much genetic input into a colony. You've got that many different successful attributes roaming around in a colony that make a colony work. It's a good way to look at it, and if you are raising queens, you want as many drones out there as you can possibly produce. You want 10 colonies for every mating queen that you can find out there. And here's where this is where I live, just out of Medina, Ohio. And if I was going to be raising queens, I'm going to go out. You can see how far that is. I'm going to go out twice that far. I want drone colonies in every quadrant there, so that when my queen flies, I don't know where the drone congregation area is in my house. You may be able to find it if you're raising queens, and if you are, congratulations. If you're not, you're like me. So I'm going to be putting drone source colonies all over that area, so that when my queen goes out, no matter where she goes, she's going to run into, and of course she's going out. Drones go out a little less than a mile to a little over a mile. Queens go out to pushing 2 miles sometimes, 1.5 miles to 2 miles, so that she isn't going to run into drones from her colony. So I want my drones out there that far. I want my drones out there far enough so that she's running into the drones I want her to run into if I'm raising queens. This is from Fred Rossman Apiaries, and he and I were talking a little bit ago. Out of Georgia every year, 60,000 packages, 20-some thousand queens. Take that times 20, and that's how many drones you need just for mating out of Georgia. So out of a colony, how many drones are going to mate from an individual colony? So he figures 1 out of 20 drones in every one of his drone source colonies mates. That's his figure, but that's what he told me. 1 out of 20, and I need 20 for every queen. You're producing millions of. Georgia needs to be producing millions of drones every year to be able to successfully mate with the thousands and thousands of queens that are coming from Georgia, out of Georgia every year. So you can see that drones begin to play a big role in how many you need and where you need them and when you need them, so that that queen that you just paid $36 for was able to mate with at least 20-some drones. When a drone mates, he flies up behind a queen, catches her from the rear, grasps her with his front legs, and in the bottom left there you can see the reproductive apparatus that enters the queen, and it breaks off right on the horns there on the left-hand side, and it snaps off and it leaves a little bit behind that as protruding from the queen's back end, which is called the mating sign. This action kills the drone, but always not immediately. Sometimes they're able to fly off. Sometimes they're even able to fly home. Seldom, though. And that's why the Arby's parking lot that I was talking about, you will find dead drones in, because the drone congregation area was somewhere right above that parking lot, and that parking lot bordered, I believe it was a parking lot for a high school football field or soccer, something. So there was kind of a large open area just next to the Arby's, and I think that's probably what it was. But you would find dead drones, and this is why. This is the drones are able to mate one time, and as the saying goes, it's only once, but they die happy. So there's a whole lot about drones. It's not everything, and I didn't think I'd be able to get to everything because it had taken too long, and we're just about where we're supposed to be. There you are, Denise.
Great, thanks, Kim. Alan already has a question. Any difference between drones produced by a laying worker and a queen?
The difference between a drone from a laying worker and a drone from a queen, genetically, genetically that laying worker then becomes the queen, so that the drone that she produces is going to be essentially the same as that worker's genes. So if she's a good mix of genes, the drone is going to pass those on. Usually the difference is size. And there are queen producers who use laying workers and who, as in drone source colonies, for that reason, is because the genetics is right. The sizes can be an issue, but if you have so many of those drones in a drone congregation area that you know their background, it becomes less important. So you're going to see a size difference if you can do a side-by-side, which is usually tricky, but from my understanding, that's the only difference.
Okay, great. Kim, we've got lots of thank yous there on the screen, folks. If you do me the favor of offering a thank you to Kim for today's session. If you have any other questions, go ahead and put those in. I'm going to switch screens and remind you can still type your question in, but remind you that the handout of today's program is there on the bottom left. You can download that to your computer or your device. Kim, you have some new projects in the work. Anything you want to share? Anything that's coming out soon?
Well, we've got the Kim and Jim Show webinars that are on at least once a month. We've got a couple left this week yet. One today. I'm doing another one at 12 o'clock today that you can catch on our webpage, register for on our webpage. It's with the Honeybee Health Coalition. Another one on Friday with the Hive Tracks people. Next month, Jim and I are, if it doesn't rain, we're taking our webinars outside. We're going to do a live one in the bee yard, him in Worcester and me up here in Medina. And I got to take care of my garden. How's that?
Great. Kevin has a question. Is there or what is the best method for increasing drone populations?
Well, you can do all of the things that queen producers do. Certainly, you can provide perfect colonies that are healthy and not stressed, so that the queen who's going to be laying however many drones feels very comfortable doing so. That's one of the things, is have healthy colonies. And a colony that's healthy is not going to be stressed by Varroa, food, or poison in the hive. And I'm going to say probably the best thing that anybody can do for the health of honeybee colonies anywhere. There's talk of nutrition and there's talk of all of this, and with Pollinator Week right now going on, a lot of people are talking nutrition, but I'm going to back up and I'm going to say keep clean wax in your colony. The stuff that we're putting, if you're putting stuff in your colony, it's staying there. It doesn't go away when you take it out. It stays in the wax, and your bees are subject to that, your drones and your queens, and if you can get rid of wax every couple of years, you're going to be doing a lot for all of your bees, certainly your drones.
Super. Dan asked, how do you know your hive is in trouble with too many drones?
Well, good question. And if you are not experienced or haven't had a lot of opportunity to look at colonies to know how many drones should be there, how do you know that there's too many or not enough? And that comes with experience. But a queen is going to produce, on average, and all of this is on average, of course, but on average, about 15% of the population of a healthy colony today, the first day of summer, is going to be about 15% drones and drone brood. And the other 85% is going to be workers and worker brood. So when you're looking at a frame and you're seeing half and half workers and drones, you probably have a problem. If you're seeing way more than that, you know you have a problem. If you're seeing far less than that, if you're seeing 100 workers and 2 drones, you probably have a problem. So it's that 85-15 ratio that you start with, and you begin to look at frames, and your eyes just, after you've done this enough times, your eyes just begin to see drones, because that's what you're looking for, and you begin to have a feel for the number.
Okay, like you, Kim, Anne likes to put strings on drones, but she's been doing that with a slip knot, slipping over the abdomen.
Yeah, that works too. And you cool them down. I put them in the fridge for about 10 minutes, and that cools them down, and it's easy to do. I started doing that after I did the glue. And they both work, and slipknot you can take off. Or you can let the drone fly and leave the leash on, and you've got this, and you can go over and pick her up, catch her by the leash. So there's a whole lot of games you can play with drones. They're fun.
And finally, Kim, Mike wants to know what your loss rate is by using just the drone trapping for Varroa.
I'm right about, on average, the last 7 years, which I have some kind of good data. I'm going to guess 6 or 7 years. I'm right about 20-25%, not quite. And that's not, some of that's Varroa, but more of it is other issues that I've got going on, and it tends to be hard winters and not enough food, and interestingly. And it's not even not enough food in the colonies. It's my bees decide to cluster away from the food and don't get to it. But I haven't had a winter where I've lost more than 25%, and I'm usually less than 20. And when you run 10 colonies, that's 2. So that's where I'm at.
Great, Kim. So thanks again. I really appreciate your time this morning on the webinar. We've got lots of thanks there on the screen.